vast majority of the mentally retarded are intelligent enough that they can be taught a great many things.
Oh shit, boys, the group chat leaked is somehow in 2025 a national security statement. This is Tuesday, the 25th of March, 2025. It is sometime in the morning when I'm recording this. And yeah, it's been a little crazy. I don't know that it's going to be a pure news recording today, but I do want to touch on a few things. But let's lead off today with the leak of a group chat. So Jeffrey Goldberg, former Israeli Defense's prison guard, currently managing editor at The Atlantic magazine, a failing and horrible magazine known for dishonesty and perpetrating such hoaxes as the Find People on Both Sides and the Suckers and Losers hoaxes, not to mention the Russia hoax, citing Defense Secretary Hegseth here on those. But yeah, completely fraudulent magazine ran by a guy who, until this happened, and I was going for multiple hours yesterday thinking that Goldberg or Greenberg or whoever, whichever of the various Bergs who ran the Atlantic, I thought he was the guy who had the seizure because somebody sent him a GIF until my wife was kind enough to point out to me that no, that was in fact Kurt Eichenwald. So I guess he's not important enough for me to remember who he is as an individual human being, and I think that says a lot. But obviously, I'm biased on the value of my own opinion. But anyway, so this group chat leaks that he claims to have been invited to by National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, which he's an interesting case, and we'll get back to it. Certainly, one of the more Zionist-friendly elements in the administration, especially the security team within the administration. Definitely one of those. If you know you were to be leaking to say somebody you had saved as Jonah IDF in your phone, he certainly would be the kind of person who might do that. Green Beret, very, very, very pro-Zionist, possibly the source of the attributed to a cabinet level official statement that the real purpose of America is to serve Israel and to put it in a preeminent position geostrategically in the Middle East. Might be that guy. It's a heavy thing to put on somebody, so without more proof, I'll reserve judgment. Now, this morning, Trump did come out and say, you know, we think that Waltz has learned his lesson. He's a good guy. He didn't do anything wrong. It's okay. So it sounds like what's going to come of this is not a whole heck of a lot. But you had some rather, if this is real, and if this is not some sort of ploy, you have revelations about America's intentions versus vis-a-vis Europe and the Middle Eastern powers, Egypt. They want compensation for clearing up the issues blocking the Red Sea. They're okay with a heavy cost was referenced. I haven't seen that brought up a lot, but when heavy cost is mentioned, usually you think in terms of lives or material. So you know, as an American, I'm genuinely concerned. Hey, how many American soldiers are you okay with dying so we can have a point of whatever to rake the Europeans over the coals? Because I'm all for raking Europeans over the coals, but I'm not super cool with sending like teenagers to get blown up by um, you know, people halfway around the world to serve that kind of interest. Like that's an imperialism that I think our founders and our framers would have had some major issues with. And I don't care how quote unquote based you are on certain, you know, social war issues. Um, Even among the top, right? That's like a concern. And it is interesting because apparently there were some divergences that Vice President Vance expressed with some of the policy. Now, I know that they've said, well, there's no daylight. And I get it, right? There's a diversity of opinion in there. But the fact that this is where we are, that there's this pushback, even if it's just on the timing of the strikes, indicates that there is a shift which is taking place. There is an accommodation of some of the legacy types, right? Some of these people who've been in the national security establishment a while. The idea even of how deeply tied we are to Israel, right? I'm sure that there's some people that, you know, see the divergence of American and Israeli interests, and they say, well, this relationship which has gone on for so long, it must be readdressed as we go forward. Um, and it also makes you think, well, you know, perhaps there was a degree of urgency created by the wars and the destabilizing situation there. And, you know, a paranoid mind might think, well, that seems intentional a little bit, right? Start some wars, get some chaos, get some violence, so that you can continue to keep America locked in there, much as America was, due to the Cold War, locked into establishing a really, you know, deep and secure security footprint in Europe that lasted decades and allowed the governments in Europe to underinvest in security and military and in their own people, um, because they didn't have to worry about those things because they had successfully brought America to fight their battles for them. Um, there's a discussion whenever there's actually, before I get to the discussion of blowback, I want to bring up another thought, and this is kind of the what if it was bait thought. Now, I've seen crazier things, so I totally buy that this could happen. I also know that the Atlantic is a total rag and that the people involved with it are scum. So let's take away okay, let's give it just happened, that damn girl, that's crazy, things happen, and put that there and say that's hypothesis A. That's the null hypothesis. It probably happened. Anything else would probably have to disprove it. Couple theories that would involve a degree more of intentionality, right? Because Signal could potentially open them up to some really nasty stuff if they get in trouble for spreading classified information on unsecure whatever. Um, I think that they can handle that, but obviously, the Democrats would love to create a new Watergate. And this does feel like an intentional effort to create one, right? I don't know how Goldberg got added. You do have to assume that the National Security Council, the National Security Advisor, the head of the CIA, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, all of which are people who have intelligence apparatuses and very serious security concerns. One would presume that they have the ability to do the basic OPSEC of, yo, check the group chat, make sure everybody who should be in here is in here. Um, I've also, you know what I mean? Like people don't always do that. The expectation of competence is one of those really dangerous things because yes, it makes sense. Yes, you should. And then people don't, and you get caught flat-footed because, well, why wouldn't you do that? Are you an idiot? Usually it's laziness, but sometimes, you got to admit. And to me, I've got this thesis in my head that our government is kind of slowly devolving into alt-right politics, I guess, because by avoiding what happened back in the day, they've really got sucked into it. And this is for anybody who's been familiar with, I don't even want to say alt-right because it's such a pejorative term and not really descriptive of anything anymore. But the dissident sphere that grew out of kind of, I guess we can call it the Trump underground of the first administration and the lead into it, and then obviously I think it merged with mainstream conservatism during the Biden era. But when it was still very much a dissident edge to the right or to a more nationalist flavor than the Trumpists were allowed to go, you saw a lot of discuss like the security conversation always ended up with the group chat getting leaked, right? People would be on Discord, and then the people that owned Discord would be, oh, well, we're Antifa, we're going to dox you, all right? People would have meetings and group chats and Telegram channels, and then people would get doxxed and blackmailed with dox, and people would say, oh, I'm a good person, I'm going to raise money, I'm going to sell books, I'm going to take donations for my podcast, and then there would be, vast situations involving blackmail using that. And that goes on to the present day. What's been so interesting to me is because the actual dissident, not whatever is called the dissident right today, but because the actual dissidents were forced into the same pool basically as the mainstream, because the mainstream was shifting in that direction anyway, is that the mistakes that were learned from by many people were institutionally already forgotten by the right, even though it's within fresh memory of most people who had even a tangential knowledge of that kind of stuff, right? Group chat security is national security, and it's a joke, but it's also not, right? Like, I don't know, and I also look back to it and I wonder really how much in those fringes of dissident politics was state actors, was people that were funded by intelligence agency, there as agents of influence or to shape perceptions. How much of even the shifting of the Overton window has become a strategy of pacing where the people setting the pace don't really care what it is, but they got to keep it paced with where the street is because they want to affect where the narrative is going as it's immediately received. And like that's a totally internally coherent way to structure psyops. So there is one thought to that Waltz either intentionally or unintentionally, or Unit 8200, or some sort of intelligence agency hostile to the United States, maybe one of the British or the French ones, that really doesn't like America and doesn't like the new administration, right? If Signal is penetrated and the administration was running group chats, and I was, say, a British spook who was a homosexual tea drinker, I would think it's hilarious to add the editor of the Atlantic to the bombing Yemen group chat. I Honestly, when this happened, I was like, I feel like I might have added that guy to a group chat as a joke years ago anyway. So, like this could be a funny, but it is, there's a potential that this could be a sophisticated intelligence operation. I think that a lot of commentators make the mistake of seeing something happen and then just assuming that the rules are what they think they are because you're a consumer of these products as an individual. Governments very likely have all sorts of interesting back end options, especially with encrypted messaging platforms, or the ability to execute man in the middle attacks. And then I think we come to the third major option here, right? So the first null hypothesis is that this is what it appears to be. The second is that it's some sort of psyop uh, targeting the administration. And then I think the third one has to be that this is the administration's own psyop. And I think the biggest arguments in favor of this are A, the nature of it, right? Oh, yo, the group chat leaked, which again, most people wouldn't get, but people who've seen that happen before understand how you can do that, how you can shape that. And also that such things are, they're whatever they're made to be. You get bunch of people to role play in a group and make it look like something that it might be or might not be. You can convince people of anything if you put enough effort into it and there's enough people willing to corroborate a story, right? So if there was this effort of we're trying to get out an unvarnished truth about the American security position and that we don't like the Europeans freeloading off of us and that we don't like the Egyptians freebooting off of us and that we do feel it to a degree overextended and tied into conflicts which don't directly benefit us and we at the very least like them to benefit us if we can't stop having these conflicts. I could certainly see this being a method of getting it out in a deniable manner, getting it out in a manner that made people aware of perhaps national security and operational security risks. Um, eh, there's reasons to think that it didn't happen this way. One, because there is a potentially tremendous trailing risk of if there was classified information communicated in that, you'd have all of a sudden like the initial Trump people just all completely jammed up on a national security case. And, like it would be a bad look if Trump had to fire a bunch of people or pardon a bunch of people a couple months in. Um, National security to many Republicans is this golden cow that can never be questioned, and it's become a very cynical exploitation of it by the left and by the globalist agenda, right? Um, all you got to do is call these people weak, and they feel that their own masculinity or their own, confidence in their ideas and in their civilization is so threatened that no, what do you mean I'm a pussy? I'll go invade Iraq for you, of course, right? Without any thought to the consequence, right? Like, how tough are we for having bombed Serbia in 19? But that's what you do. You can cow a weak or an unfocused thing by attacking masculinity. And there's certain groups historically that have really, really pushed that tactic. I personally think that this is kind of a Mike Flynn 2.0 situation, right? Mike Flynn, when he was Trump's first national security advisor in the first term, was immediately basically shown the door after like a week or two because the FBI had entrapped him by getting him with perjury traps. And I want to say they're like 201s or whatever. And they were asking him questions. They were trying to get information from him. And then it's not a 201. I can't remember the name of the form though. But they were setting him up as a perjury trap because they wanted to get rid of him on national security grounds. What do you know? And at that point, right, it was Pence that said to Trump, "You got to let him go," right? And he lets him go, and that in many ways signaled the ultimate derailing of the first administration, and really a permanent way, right? So I think that the biggest thing to take away from this is that Trump 2.0 is not willing to even entertain the premise of this, right? If they say X, Y, and Z happened, he will find a way to make the facts and the outcomes shape what he needs, which is good, which is really good because it speaks to an intentionality and kind of this method agnosticism, right? Trump doesn't care. Trump needs his people doing his things, and if they end up having to color a little bit outside the lines, he's probably going to reward them if they get away with it. Um, Obviously, they didn't this time, or whatever happened happened, and it may really potentially be ugly. But if this is the attempt, if this is the big play from the left, we're going to declassify or disqualify all of his top national security people. We're going to, create a scandal, and there will be hearings, and the media will have leaks, which probably is the source of this. Let's be honest here. I would not be shocked if the source of this was FBI counterintelligence, CIA counterintelligence, or probably Mossad, because a lot of people that are like those, I'm Jewish, but I'm secular, influencer accounts that you see out there. just happen to be popping up and pushing memes to try to hurt the administration, right? There's this deniable side to psyops that it's really useful to kind of see where the narrative is going if you follow it. Of there are figures who are, you don't want to just go out and assume everybody is like Mossad or Shin Bet or whatever, but a lot of these like urbanite, liberal, Jewish, secular types who find themselves in a place where they're playing a character of like a rural southerner, a white person, or where they're attacking or they're manipulating interests around it. You see it especially in the sports world, right? A lot of the influencers and the podcasters, the guy who runs Barstool comes to mind, right? Portnoy. Same kind of thing, where it's this attack on masculinity to provoke a reaction. In that case, it's to bet. In this case, it's to support stupid policy. But that push, that seemed, you know what I mean, when the media and the deniable media influencer networks and the national security apparatus and foreign media are all marching in kind of a Obama themed lockstep, you can tell that there's a larger operation going on. And it may not be that the operation was, the origination of this. It might simply be, oh, this happened. That's hilarious. Let's go get him. Because, by the way, if this is legit and this guy was put to that group chat and he saw X, Y, and Z, um, who knows who we showed it to? I don't really think he would have kept any secrets if they were shared with him as secrets. And obviously, there might be penalties for that because he's not the director of the CIA or the Secretary of Defense. There is not a presumption that just because something gets texted to you, you can go share it with all of your buddies, and especially to try to weaponize it against the government. To move off of the topic and into a broader discussion of the topics of the day, so we aren't here forever. I do think that there's this question of is the shoe going to drop on the actual criminality which has existed and been, by this point, pretty well documented for most people, right? I personally have seen huge amounts of fraud that were protected at an institutional level. That it just, you know what I mean? It is their job to have taken care of that and they failed to do so. And I think most people and most walks of life, most professional experiences have seen something similar over the years. And there's this discussion right now from the more judicial side, the Department of Justice and the FBI side of the government of, well, what's really going on with the Epstein files? What's really going on with X, Y, and Z situation? And they keep saying, basically, give us time. We are preparing prosecutions and we want to make sure we're not indicting or arresting or whatever people in a way that we lose, the charges get dropped and we get sued for, harassment or whatever, which would no, that is an excuse, right? That's preparing an excuse for, well, we didn't charge so and so because, we just couldn't prove it. Gosh dang it. Right. The Jim Comey excuse for Hillary Clinton. I don't know that any reasonable prosecutor would indict or the Ben Hur, defense of Joe Biden, right? That, well, he's too, he doesn't have it all there. No jury would listen to the testimony of this man under oath or whatever. There, I think, is a degree of that, and I think part of it is the Obama era trap, which came about when it was a, well, don't prosecute all the people that did all these war crimes during the period where we were torturing people in like black sites and whatever else happened. Um, Protect them, and the system must go on. The system is more important than you. And by the way, here's Kennedy getting his head blown off. Isn't that cool? Right. So that almost certainly happened to a degree with Obama, and I think with Trump one. And I think we're hitting into the period where we're going to see something with Trump too, where there is really this. You're going to have to confront um, deep-seated interest. Are you going to charge them, or are you just going to keep talking about it? Now, there is a strategy, right? And just continually talking about it and building up an appetite for action, right? You want to do something, you can't do something because people don't really understand it because right now it's kind of a narrow issue or they don't have the background on it. So you've got to build up that case, right? If there is to be an argument made that Q isn't anything other than like the most malicious psyop ever, it sure seems to be that maybe they were building an appetite, building a, even if it's like indirectly sourced or improperly, whatever. But like this is happening. You got to wake up. You got to do this, and like not all of it's good intention, not all of it's in the positive direction, but overall, you're getting things into the narrative, into the discussion that are useful. And I do apologize. My puppy is shuffling around. Hello, puppy. Hi. Hi. I know. I've got a few more things written on the whiteboard. I want to get through them. The Democrats are in disarray. So this is tied to that. I talked about this a bit yesterday. Institutionally, the power of the Democratic Party is at its lowest point, and things don't look super favorable in terms of the midterms. They have no control over certain aspects of the government, and they put themselves in a situation where, if they lose, it could get potentially really, really ugly, because they've created kind of this attitude of total war, total political domestic war, and then they found themselves losing, right? So now they've gone from, we're gonna kill you all you terrible hicks, and we're gonna put you in camps, and we're gonna use F-15s, and your assault rifles will be meaningless, and to um, please be nice, we're all one team, we're all, oh, we're patriots. And you've seen Bernie and you've seen AOC, try to go out there and try to kickstart the energy of the party with these rallies, but it's very much this period of soul searching. And I think the most hilarious part of it is that the absolutely predictable outcome of this will be that the Democrats go into 2028 just like they did into 2024 and 2020, and they're going to have a popular populist candidate available. I don't think it'll be Bernie. I don't even think it'll be AOC, to be honest, but I think somebody will be smart enough to try to lean in and, give them something new and fresh, and they're going to absolutely throw them overboard to appease to like the middle of the road milquetoast suburbanite liberal redditor, and it's just going to be an institutional pick, and they're going to lose yet again because they've pissed off the progressives for however many cycles this is in a row. I think that it's going to be hilarious. Now, counter side, maybe the progressive does end up winning, and they do end up getting completely get their clock cleaned by Baby Vance or whoever it is, probably Baby Vance in 28. So I'm not super bullish on their future, and I don't think that they are either. And I think that there is this discussion going on among the people on that side of the fence who are at least open to this idea that they are, that their consensus narrative is not necessarily gospel truth. I don't want to give Bill Maher credit, but obviously he kind of stands at the front of that group. John Fetterman's another example of people who I don't think it's good intention. I think it's a really cynical ploy, but they at least understand the pragmatic reality, which is they have to adapt or they are really doomed. Now, I wonder where it's going to come in with policy because economic populism is the natural lean in, but they've largely lost the working class. Um, the union push doesn't really do anything for people who never really had a shot at a union job. Uh, and even then, I know plenty of people, really intelligent people, who really strongly dislike the unions, and they know the arguments against union, and they don't think that it benefits workers, and they're somebody who supports workers or are a worker themselves. Um, a lot of the issue that the left institutionally is having is that it's become maladapted for the current situation. Um, the 90s, the early aughts, um, the Obama thing, right? They were made for that. There was a lot of synergy. There were these self-reinforcing virtuous cycles that improved their fitness, selected for good people. But now all they really have left is this like crusty fringe of the judiciary, this critarchy of judges who are doing everything they can to hold on to power and like really ugly and anti-democratic ways by just trying to disempower the political branches of government, which some may argue has always kind of been the case with the left, that everything was just a smoke show up front and that it was the judges running things, which there is a value to that. But even if that's the case, we're moving to the point where it's not like we can just politely leave it anymore. At a certain point, the administration, and they'll, I think, work through all the proper avenues, but assuming that the Supreme Court doesn't act in its own self-preservation, there will hit a point where the executive, with or without Congress, will have to reevaluate its relationship with the judicial branch and its acceptance of the idea of like judicial review, um, which will change things because it will strip away a lot of the power and a lot of the social, though what the liberals would call progress, I would say experiments, but almost all of that stuff, all the like really crazy stuff, only in America stuff. That's all. That's all usually just some liberal court decision. People who don't, get into the background on it don't understand just how genuinely political the courts have been over the decades and how much courts have driven policy, right? But when you start thinking about it, it's pretty clear. I could start naming cases. I don't want to come across as a bigot, but everything from ending segregation to legalizing sodomy and abortion, um, really innovative views of federalism that aren't tracking with the Constitution. All of that is there, and it's all built on a house of sand because the Constitution is actually pretty easy to read. So I don't know, because there's this idea of constitutional supremacy, and Dr. Ron Paul always really seemed to put it the best that the Constitution is supposed to be some sort of unbreakable contract. It's an actual civic contract, and when one side starts abrogating it, well, then it makes the whole thing to a degree void, and you can't do that. That's the whole point with it, right? So in the amendments to the Constitution, the properly passed ones, because there is a process for changing the Constitution, right? The Ninth and Tenth Amendments really leave all of the powers not specifically put in the Constitution, and they say, well, these are reserved to the states and to the people respectively. And that's it. You don't have the option to go in there, federal government. Now, the courts have been able to use just the most tortured logic possible over the years to get whatever they wanted out of that, right? And they found in things like the Interstate Commerce Clause, penumbras of emanations that let them do all sorts of things, which are just on the face of it absurd and completely out of the scope of what the federal government and the federal judiciary is allowed to rule on. But we're here, right? And once you've abrogated power to yourself, you can't let it go. It's a terrible system, and it also exists because judges are incredibly easy to blackmail, right? Because they don't like have an army, they don't have a media setup. They're a judge, and when the goons show up and they threaten their kids or whatever, like they get what they want. So it's a in that sense, it's a really good system for a security state. The judge covers everyone's butt, and it gives a veneer of respectability. The judge gets to do what they want because they're kind of, it's a choose your own adventure dystopia that they're creating. And then the criminal gangs that actually run everything and seem to profit off of everything have a really simple and clean lever to operate when they need something. So it's all working. But the problem is right now you're seeing this, I think, overwhelming pressure on the judiciary from multiple angles, and you can't serve two masters, right? So there is a breakdown in function, and it's only going to continue to snowball because the divergence in interests will only continue to grow. A couple more little things here because we are talking about this new federalism, but the I'm just fascinated by what's going to happen to Maryland. And I know that's stupid. I know that's kind of weird, but like, okay, so Maryland, at least the part of it which is in the larger DC metro area, to include Baltimore, right? It is very African American, and a huge percentage of the people that live there and the money of the households that exist there comes from federal government employment. I heard the Secretary of the Treasury, Lutnick, the other day talking about how between him and Elon Musk, the debate isn't, to cut the government. It's his position. He wants to cut the government 50% because he can do that legally. And Elon wants to cut the government 80%. So, they're negotiating on the finer points. But what does that do to Maryland? And to me, this is like a broader social question because the social cohesion of that part of Maryland and the adjacent part of Virginia, although because the demographics less important there, what really happens to the capital district as money is leaving it? Because you're going to see a restructuring of the federal government, a shrinking of the federal government, a shrinking of budgets for, I would presume, the major employers out there, which would be government contractors and service providers. What does that do? What is the real impact of these cuts going to be? There's a thought to putting these federal agencies and saying, well, we're going to take you and we're going to put your headquarters in a state that's way outside of DC, which sounds pretty good, and I've heard promulgated by the Trump people. The counterpoint to it is if, say, for example, you put the Health and Human Services and you said, well, there's a lot of fat people in Mexico, so we're going to put you in New Mexico. Fair. But the number of employees and the size of the budget and the scope of operations that the HHS has, even drastically reduced, would still probably dwarf a lot of what's in New Mexico, right? And so you would end up in a situation pretty quickly where it might be this element of the federal government that has basically taken over a state, that it's become a state within a state. Oh, and by the way, it's not really accountable to the main um, Article 2 executive because there is this vast distance between where they are and where federal power is centralized. So there are dark sides to federalism. Of course, this sort of thing was widely discussed in the Federalist Papers. It drives me nuts that all these people can talk all day long about politics and theory and this, that, and then they haven't read the Federalist Papers. And I admit I've only read like half of them, but a lot of the issues that we run into with the function of the American government were like specifically addressed in our founding documents and in the documents explaining them. We were given a user manual. It's just we're not people don't read it. Oh, it's a nice book. It's a beautiful book. Um, Completely ignore, or if they do read it, they treat it like the Bible and they read it as scripture without wanting to even dig very deeply. Oh, those are very beautiful words. Indeed. Amen. And it's tough because the core of American governance is the shared dedication to the Constitution shared by everybody who's been in public service, basically, right? That's the backbone of this country, is there's a huge percentage of Americans who have at some point in their lives sworn an oath to the Constitution and who take that seriously because they're, like human beings who, oh, I swore a sacred oath. I should probably take that seriously, right? That's a good thing to have in a society. When people make those kind of commitments and honor them, that is how you build a civilization. And it's been so robust that, despite a lot of really negative things going on, it still hasn't collapsed. And it still is in a position where it might become once again very viable. Speaking actually of the Health and Human Services, I did want to make a brief comment on the soda wars going on. Now, I support Coke because Pepsi had a bunch of nuclear submarines and wasted the opportunity, and I do not support the fumbling of the bag here. Also, Pepsi is just an open front for intelligence, which is fun. But Coke is great. I support Coke. I am not paid by the Coke people to say it is bad for you. I don't really drink much soda. I don't have any Coke in my fridge. I might have a root beer at some point this week, but I'm also in shape and exercise regularly. If you take health advice from people on the internet, if your consumption of soda or your policy on food stamps is guided by a Twitter user, a YouTuber, a podcaster, then I humbly request that you correct yourself, even if it's humiliating, even if it's painful. Don't get opinions from people that are outside of you. That's just stupid. It's like this embarrassing abdication of responsibility. I don't need my own thoughts. I'm just gonna, oh, that guy's got a good thing. He's popular too. Gosh, it's stupid. It's my windmill. If I am the Don Quixote here, it's the windmill that I'm tilting at. Uh, I do have another actually serious comment on Health and Human Services, and that is the CDC. I can't remember the name of the person, but the appointee, it's a University of Wisconsin person. It's a career bureaucrat with ties to definitely not our biological weapons research programs. No, just some wonderful nonprofits and that kind of stuff. Um, Definitely not a bio warrior. Definitely not somebody who would cook up plagues or support the cooking up of plagues. But like, okay, we have supposedly taken power. You got RFK in there. Where is MAHA? Where is Make America Healthy Again? Because I was promised fat camps. I was promised that we were going to take homeless people and drug addicts and we were going to place them, surround them with concertina wire and machine gun nests and have PAs blasting like the best of 80s rock and roll all day while they farmed with their bare hands in the sun for organic vegetables that they would cook and eat and have with delicious animals that they raised as livestock. And we're getting some bioweapons researcher as the head of CDC and RFK going on these rants about anti-Semitism on Twitter. Bobby, we all heard you talk about COVID and Ashkenazi Jews. It's okay. You don't, I get that you feel the need to compensate. You might be overcompensating. They might pick up on that. So just chill. Just chill, dog. But um, I say this as a criticism. I don't want this to be a negative thing because with all of this, there's so much sound and fury right now. And I don't think it's signifying nothing. I think that it actually is signifying this great like winds of change, and that looking back, this period will be seen as Russia during some of the periods during the 19 teens, for example. It is a very rapid time. There's a lot of change. And the thing about revolutions is that they're circular, right? That's why they call them a revolution because they keep rolling over and spinning. Uh, the wheels are turning very quickly. I am so far, I guess, to a degree, disappointed by we haven't gotten everything with it, but I think that there is a conscious effort which was absent last time to set up for proper action, and so I keep staying hopeful that they're going to at some point in the next quarter or two here really step it up a notch. We've laid a good foundation. We're ready to enact phase two or whatever. Um, I also understand that a lot of this is theater and a lot of this is Like you justify things after the fact and claim credit for stuff that just happened. That's intelligent business. That's, Trump. Trump understands the world, at least in that sense, especially the ephemeral and perceptual nature of power. Uh, so I think that we are in a good spot because people seemingly are meaning well. I think the best thing that came out of that group chat was seeing that the people that are making these high level national security decisions are doing it with, even though you may disagree with them, at least ideologically or like logically consistent positions. Oh, we should bomb Yemen because of this. Oh, we should hold off on a little bit. I don't think it'll change too much. And also, I don't like getting screwed over by these people that hate us in Europe. Oh, that's a fair point. I still like you, and I think we should work together. Oh, that's great. Right? That's like adults talking. That is a, if you've been in a workspace with a group chat, you understand how an effective work group chat can be. Um, so they're trying. I will give them that. I think that they've made a lot of mistakes, at least minor ones, right? Like they shouldn't have embraced the Ukraine thing. They should never have tried to take ownership of the war. The idea that Trump thinks it's a good point to keep talking about giving javelins instead of blankets, that's fine, but that's not your constituency, and they're never going to like you. But also, you have to account for the fact that the Ukrainians and the Israelis and I don't know, there's like all these various ethnic and gay mafias which have penetrated our government that they seem to be slowly working out. And then they'll like include major figures from them. So you can never really tell. Is it a sop to them? Hey, you're losing power. Here's a token, to show that we aren't just trying to get rid of you guys. Or is a much more cynical game being played here. And I don't think really it's for me at this point with the lack of information that I have to judge. I think that it's important to ask these questions as we go along because with these questions in mind, you can consume what happens, you can see what's going on, and I think infer a little bit more, draw at least more sophisticated models of what is happening as opposed to just being completely credulous about each and everything. And the great thing is that, I mean, over the years and even every day, right? More and more people seem to be getting to the point where they are actually making efforts to think for themselves, to engage with these ideas, to get a little weird with it, to have fun with it, to not just be tied to the gray, boring, whatever, but to inject a sense of whimsy and also like pure animal terror back into politics. I think that those are good and healthy human things. And so, as we build towards that brighter future, I'm going to sign off and wish everybody listening a wonderful rest of their day. Goodbye.